Welcome to the Placement Edge. I'm your host, Rahul, and today I'm with Serge Gojkovic from JobBolt. He's the co-founder. Welcome, Serge.
Hi, thank you very much for having me here today. It's great to be here.
Serge, I'd love for you to take us through sort of what you've been through before you co-founded JobBolt.
Yeah, one of the reasons I started JobBolt is because of sort of my history and past. I've been pretty lucky in my life. Like I've helped launch a couple big brands internationally, helped launch Grinder, helped launch Pluto TV, which is pretty big in the States and also some European countries. And, it was interesting. Like I've never thought I would be looking for a job at my age. And then one day, I got laid off and I started looking for a job. And not right away because I got a great severance package and I was pretty chill, so I took my time. And then, yeah, I started applying and it was different this time. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. So I talked to a couple of my recruiter friends, as I sort of reached out and networked. And, quickly learned that they were just way too busy,
Mm,
and the problem was, and a problem that we solve for at JobBolt is that recruiters and hiring managers are just overwhelmed with the amount of applications they're getting. Because in the old days, you're too young to remember this, but in my old days, when you wanted to write a cover letter and you wanted to adjust your resume, that took a good couple hours to do, right? Because you wanted to
yeah.
make sure, right? And now it takes seconds, right? Because you just literally copy and paste the job description, your current resume, and you tell ChatGPT or whoever, write me a cover letter and optimize my resume. So what's happening is all these hiring managers are using these applicant tracking systems that search for keywords, but everybody's resume has all the perfect keywords because they've all
Mm,
been doctored with AI. And so they're getting, hundreds of applicants for one position, and they have no way to really tell who's got the experience and who was maybe an event intern and now is an event specialist because AI embellished a little bit when it redid their resume. So that's where I kind of came in, and I was just like, I need to figure this out because I'm listening to people on TikTok and on Instagram complaining that they're never hearing anything back. And it wasn't the recruiter's fault. It's just they were overwhelmed. So I thought there's got to be a better way to do this.
mm,
So yeah, and honestly, like I kind of lean in on things that disrupt the way that we do things. Like Grinder was something that disrupted the dating industry because it was the first, dating app, one of the first on mobile. And then, Pluto TV disrupted the way that we watch TV because it was
mm,
free streaming TV. And so I looked at, and then I was like, wow, this really hasn't changed much in a long time. And the process is exactly the same. Maybe we don't deliver it by mail or deliver it by hand like 50 years ago, but putting your whole background and your whole life experience on a piece of paper works maybe when you've had one or two jobs, but when you're like in a full-time career and you've been doing it for 15 or 20 years, it's impossible to represent that on a piece of.
mm. So where's JobBolt come in then in terms of solving some of those problems or issues you identified?
Yeah, so the cool thing about JobBolt is the reason I started the company. Yes, I started the company so that employers could find more qualified candidates. But I think the real reason I started the company is because I really wanted people to have the opportunity to be heard, number one, and two, to get their jobs faster because the whole process just took too long. So my goal was to let people have the opportunity to actually talk about themselves and to get them into the jobs a lot faster. So Jobbo can come in many different areas. It can come in at the very beginning of the process. So someone can post a job posting with us. So we work like a regular job board. And then from there, instead of sending in your resume on our Job Bolt website, you literally click this button called Easy Interview and you look at the job description. And if you're interested in the job, you can schedule an interview or you can do an interview right on the spot. And the interview looks exactly like you and I. So it's literally an AI generated individual who interacts with you and asks the questions. Now, if you're an employer, so you can post it on our website, but you can also, like, if you have your own website, you can just, once they've applied through your website, send them a link and then they can interview when they're ready. The cool thing about JobBolt is people can interview if they want at 3 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't really matter because the idea is, you can interview whenever you're ready and whenever you want to. And that actually works really well. Like we just recently had a company in Los Angeles that needed to hire for about 15 positions. And they had over 100 applicants, right? And
Yeah,
so
well,
they had their own little screening process that they did, but they still, even after the screening process, had over 100 applicants. So they were able to email a link to each one of those applicants and say, hey, can you please take this interview?
mm,
And, we had over 100 people do the interview and it was really, really interesting. Like, what we'll do at JobBolt is we, provide a summary of the interview, we provide a score, we provide a ranking. And it not only compares that person's answers to the best possible answers for an interview, but it also compares it to the other people that interviewed for the same role. So
wow.
the rankings can kind of change a little bit. Like you might be number two, but somebody else might be better. And then tomorrow you're number three in the ranking, right?
Mm,
And the interesting thing about the process with the employers is they can customize the questions. We help them come up with questions, but they can customize them. They can interview in multiple languages. So if you upload a job description in German, guess what? The interview is done in German. If you upload it in Spanish, it's done in Spanish, right? And that comes in handy for certain markets where there might be people that are multilingual or you're looking for multilingual people. And not only do they get the summary and the score and all of that stuff, but they also get to be able to review the video. So if they want to, let's say they see like this person scored, number two or number three in the rankings, they can go in and then see, look at parts of the video, fast forward through it, and maybe get clarification on some answers. We don't judge people by the way, our AI is not looking at the way someone's dressed or their mannerisms or any of that. What we're looking for is, do they know the answers to the questions?
mm,
And are they able to explain them? And part of what the AI does is it really digs in. So if someone says, well, I've used so and so software in my career, it may come back and say, give me an example of how you use that software. Right.
yeah,
So
that's
we
dynamic.
yeah, it's dynamic. It does follow-up questions. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, awesome. That's a really interesting approach, sort of in the current sort of evolving space with AI and HR and recruiting. Where do you think it's going? So I think you've got a really good solution for employers to essentially like sift through applications, get genuine responses to questions and differentiate. So you're not looking at, let's say it's ChatGPT has ultimately written 100 out of the 100 applications, your
Yeah.
system's bypassing that. But where do you think it's going as time sort of goes on, like looking at 18 months or 3 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I kind of predicted this I predicted this like 6 months ago. Like, people were like, this is just so weird, Serge. Like, people are not going to want to talk to a Zoom camera with an AI persona on it and answer questions about a job. And I disagreed and I said, pretty soon you're going to be ordering through the McDonald's drive-thru and it's going
Mm,
to be AI taking your order. And once you start doing that and over again, or to order your medicine through the pharmacy or whatever, it's going to become very normal to have a two-way interaction with AI to be able to get what you need, right? And in this case, you need a job and we're helping you get that. I think down the road, like one of the things that we did with JobBolt is we made it really simple. We didn't want to have companies have to, change their whole hiring process to be able to use our product. They can use our product whether they have a hiring process or they don't.
mm,
So you can use JobBolt in many different ways, and we kept it simple for that purpose. We have also, people say, as I'm talking to sort of venture capitalists, they're like, "Well, what's your target?" And I would say our target is small to medium sized businesses, right? Like I'm not really interested in the IBMs of the world right now,
mm,
only because I think there's so much red tape there as far as hiring that yes, the ticket size is bigger once you get through it, but the getting through it is painful. We also believe that, Joanne's floral shop that needs hire someone for, to manage the store, to work as a retail assistant. She needs to hire someone too. And she doesn't have, she doesn't have the resources to be able to. So bottom line is we're looking at small to medium sized businesses, everything from local retail shops to restaurants, bars, but also like the local web design shop or the
Yeah.
local, it can be anything. So yeah, it's to answer your question, where do I see it going? I feel like people will have much more experience interacting with AI. And I think that people will use AI even more than they are today to help get more work done faster. And in my case, we're just trying to get people into jobs faster.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting insight, is that allowing, like, breaking down the scheduling barrier where, you know, there might be unavailability on the employers or the candidate side, which leads to, a multi-week or maybe even a multi-month process. Have you found, like, taking the example of the 15 positions, how
Yeah.
how quick were those filled from start to finish?
Yeah, pretty quickly. So they literally, advertised the role again. They got their applicants. They already had some applicants in the pipeline. They sent everybody the link. People started interviewing right away. I would say we got through about 100 people interviewing within like 24 hours to 36 hours. But we could have done that within 10 minutes, right? Because we can handle, like, if all 100 of them had come at the same time, we could have gotten them done, within 12 minutes, whatever the average time was for the interviews. So
Understand.
it didn't really matter to us, but then they, reviewed everything and looked at the reporting, and then they invited all the candidates into the office that were the top picks. I think they hired everybody and placed them within like probably like 4 or 5 days,
Wow.
it, which is pretty fast, because it takes a lot longer typically, even just to set up a screening call can end up taking a lot of time. Or, even if you don't want to do the screening call and you just want to invite people in for an interview or on a video call for an interview, it still takes time scheduling, it takes time coordinating.
Like,
Yeah,
even
you know.
allowing, like, even if it was a 10 to 15-minute interview and allowing a half-hour block, 100 people is 50 hours straight. So,
Yeah,
or it's a full-time week.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was talking to the guy who used us. He's the CEO of this company, and he was just like, this is like, because this is incredible. Like, our prices are not crazy, right? Like, you can buy packages starting for like $90, right? So it's not crazy. It's based upon the amount of interviews that you want and all that stuff, and you can do add-ons and all this other stuff. But bottom line is, even the most expensive package, if you're interviewing a couple hundred people, as a business owner, I would totally use it, because there's no way that you could get through all those people. And even if you had like extra employees interviewing them, what a waste of time and money for them. Right. Because most of the time you're just going back and forth, or a lot of people apply for jobs and don't even know that they have applied because they're using new job application apps that just apply for them on their behalf. Right. So I think it's really interesting. I think it really can save people a lot of time on both sides, both from the employer side and the employees.
Yeah, got it. What, like, with your platform, and assuming that this technology just keeps developing and becomes a new norm, what
Yeah.
tips would you give, I guess, for both sides? Like, what tips would you give to employers who are using AI in the recruiting process? And on the same token, what tips would you give candidates who are interacting with these various platforms and trying to secure, a living wage?
Yeah. I would say from the employer side, I would say, remember, this is just the one tool in your toolkit, right? We're not the end all say all of, who you should hire or who you shouldn't hire. We're really here to help you see a little more clearly and make your own decisions. We don't ever decide for an employer and say this person should not be interviewed. We make recommendations, and we'll say like, this person has shown blah 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 and they should probably be interviewed, or we'll say stuff like, this candidate doesn't seem to have the qualifications, but you may want to check that out further. So we're real careful not to have AI make the hiring decisions. We're just a tool. So I always tell employers, make sure you use this like a tool. You're going to want to bring people in eventually, like, or interview them yourself. And then from the employee side, I would say, this is also a tool for you. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're looking at adding in down the road, like instant feedback, right? Like, which is something that, you know, I think is the biggest complaint. People interview and interview and interview for jobs. And honestly, they don't hear much back. Like they just hear that they didn't get the job,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so I think one of the things that we would love to do down the road is provide instant feedback if the employer wants to do that. So if someone interviews for a job, they can send them a note and say like, "Hey, your interview was in the top 20th percentile of the interviews that we got." So that people know that I did pretty good on this, or if it wasn't as good, then they would say like, one of the reasons you were in the bottom 20 percentile is because you didn't really answer any questions clearly, So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So it allows, because you're right, like typically for a job, either a candidate will get no response if they haven't been progressed, or they'll get the generic, thanks for
Yeah.
participating. At this time, we've decided not to proceed with your application. And it kind of just leaves it there. So this
Yeah, nobody really
provides a
ever
bit of a
learned.
learning tool.
Yeah, nobody ever really learns. I've offered the app to friends of mine who are interviewing for jobs. I'm like, give me the job description. I'll upload the job description for you and you can practice, like have it interview you. And I've actually, when because I do some consulting work and stuff on the side as well, I've used it to train myself, so it's nice to, it asks hard questions, you're just like, and when it puts you on the spot, it's like you got to really understand. And I've learned that when I answer interview questions, I have a tendency to be too broad, right? Like,
Mm,
it's good to be a visionary, which I feel like I am, but it's also, the devil's in the details, as they say, right? So I have to be able to convince someone if I'm applying for a job that, yes, I can think 30,000 feet, but I also understand the stuff that's closer to the ground that needs to be dealt with and decisions need to be made on, which that was a good reminder for me when I was just doing practice interviews to test the product. Like
yeah.
I was interested to get the feedback.
Fascinating. Have you, in terms of guardrails, like in this space, what sort of guardrails do you think are important with like in the AI and recruiting space?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you should never use AI as your sole decision maker, right?
Yeah,
It's just one piece of the puzzle, and there are other pieces of the puzzle, including a resume, including references, including a personal interview, including taking maybe a test of some sort. Like, so there's different other tools in your toolkit that you can use to make your final decision. So I would say as far as guardrails go, it was really important for us, as we're testing the product to make sure that, it's kind of funny actually, when we were first testing the product before we actually, figured out how it worked, or got it to where we were happy with it. There was a point where I was doing some testing and I actually asked the AI, I said, well, what would be your answer for this question? And it responded.
oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had to put up those kinds of guardrails to keep that from happening, like making sure that people couldn't trick the system or, that's why we include the video. So like if someone thinks like, wow, this person answered these answers so perfectly, well, you can review the video. If it looks like they're reading, they probably are cheating, right?
Mm, mm,
So there's interesting little guardrails that we had to put in to make sure that, the interviews were not modified or tricked and stuff like that. We have some security features to be able to do that. But as far as like guardrails go for AI, we were very clear as far as letting people know, like right from the beginning, that this is AI doing the interview. We don't try to make it seem like it's not
a real
AI. We're very
person. Yeah.
clear. We're very clear that there's going to be a camera. Some people don't seem to read this stuff. I've had people show up on these AI video interviews, not really dressed for an interview. And I'm just kind of like, oh, wow, that's interesting. But yeah, we try to make it as clear as possible for them so that they know, what to expect as they sort of turn on the camera. We also, we have some interesting stuff like if someone, let's say, freaks out, we give them one chance to pick up where they left off, right?
Okay,
Or if there's like a technical glitch, right? So let's say you're doing your interview and all of a sudden you forgot to plug in your laptop and it runs out of power, right? You can go back and it'll pick up exactly, it'll say like, oh, looks like we had some technical difficulty. Let's pick up where we left off. But we only give
cool.
you one chance. Yeah, we don't let you change your answers backwards, but we do let you continue the interview and we only let you do that once. So, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I've seen just I think on my own social media, there's a lot of like, deep fake avatars and the like.
Mhm.
Has anyone come up with an avatar of themselves and presented their AI avatar to your system?
No, not yet. And that's kind of why we have the videos, because I think if someone answered everything like really perfectly,
Mm,
we'd be able to tell from the videos if they were doing like a deep fake.
yeah,
It would be pretty obvious.
yeah, interesting. I guess from your perspective, like being on your side running the company, where in terms of like is there a perfect toolkit that a company should use? Or like what's the gold standard, I guess, of hiring from your perspective?
I mean, it really depends. There's so many systems out there now. And quite honestly, there's a lot of noise in the HR world right now. So people promising, much like ourselves, right? Like people promising the opportunity to save time, save money. I think you have to find the right tool set. And I'm a believer that it shouldn't just be one product from start to finish. I mean, and a lot of these products allow you to plug in different things, but I think you have to find what's right for you and the size of your company and where you see yourself growing to. If you're using recruiters or not using recruiters, how many people will be using the system. I mean,
Mm,
I think there's a lot of different factors that people have to take into account to pick the right hiring system. So I wouldn't be in a position to say this company is perfect for that company, or even Job Bolt is perfect for you, right? Like we've made it so broad that 99% of the time it should work with anything that you work with.
yeah,
But, it's still, there's always a system out there that maybe doesn't work well with us.
yeah. I guess moving completely off kill, you seem really busy. What do you like? How do you manage your time, and how do you manage your time effectively?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like between some consulting work I do, co-founding, Job Bolt, it has been busy. Like it's in a good way. I try to be good to myself, right? Like if I have a big win for the day, I'm totally, totally cool with taking the rest of the day off. Like if I had a goal today of like, or let's say I landed a big client or something along those lines, I don't see anything wrong with rewarding myself and being good to myself. I say that it usually lasts for about an hour and then I'm back at work. But, I try. Just the other day, like I ended up landing a fairly big account and I was like, I haven't been to the movies in a long time in the middle of the afternoon. I'm going to go see a movie. So I
Good
think
on you.
you kind of have to find a healthy place between workload and getting things done. And, if you're in a relationship, making sure you pay attention to that person, um, attention to your pets, you have to find the right balance. But for me,
Yeah.
what I do is I make sure I take time for myself. Like that half an hour. Listen, I'm not against afternoon naps either. I gotta be honest. Like I'll work till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and sometimes I'll get up at like 8. Sometimes I need a nap at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for 10 minutes, right? And that to me completely recharges me and lets me work for the rest of the day. So you have to figure out what works for you. That's what works.
Yeah, I really liked you used the word balance, and
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer of that. I think with the current sort of modern day work life sort of balance, like there is, sometimes hard pushes, and it's a really nice thing to sort of have in the back of your mind that we can counterbalance this by, like your example of the movie was really apt in that regard, where like you've done something, got your win for the day, you go, you know what, I'm gonna go watch a movie just to counterbalance what my
Yeah.
day's been tracking as.
I mean, I find myself, like I am one of those people that is always on their phone, and that's unfortunate,
Mm,
but I am. And I don't think I ever will not be. And what I find is when I'm working like a lot, like you don't really realize how much you're working, but you figure it out after a while, and like you have to force yourself sometimes to just put the phone down. And that's why I like going to the movies, because I can't really screw around on my phone, right? It's not allowed, it's not looked at fondly. So it kind of forces me to shut down my phone. It forces me to focus in on one thing, and that's not a bad.
yeah. I guess what would be like there's a lot of noise, and you mentioned this, there's a lot of noise at the moment in the recruiting space. What are some handy like bits of advice you'd give to recruiters or recruitment firms? Like what would be being sort of in your position? What's your advice to that cohort?
Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind, I'm not gonna say because I'll get myself in trouble, but,
Eh,
recruiters don't know what to like, when I've applied for jobs in the past, like, recruiters don't know what to do with my background. Like, they look at it and they're just puzzled. So, I have an interesting relationship with recruiters,
mm,
but, what I will say, my advice to recruiters is to take a second. Like look at your LinkedIn inbox for one. Like I find that, people like will post stuff and they'll say like, "Hey, a friend of mine," and I'll reach out to them because of job bolt or whatever, right? And they'll say like, "Oh, I have this job I'm hiring for," and I'll reach out to them to the LinkedIn, mailbox, and I can see that they haven't read it, right? Because you see the little face if they've read it or not. And
yeah,
I'm like, why wouldn't you post something on LinkedIn to get people to respond to you? Like, I'm trying to like, okay, maybe for the algorithm, but no, these are legitimate roles that they're hiring for. So I would say my big advice is check your LinkedIn mailbox, because I think that there may be some good candidates in there that you may
yeah.
want to, sure, there's some annoying salespeople like me that are reaching out, but I think it's also good because there are probably people that are actually following up and don't just apply through the normal means. So I would say be a little better at communication, even though I know they're overwhelmed. Like I have so many recruiter friends and they're so overwhelmed. And yeah, just try to get back to people because it's so frustrating. It just creates this like almost like a flywheel of anxiety and distrust on all sides. Like it just kind of keeps going and going. So everybody should really try to work together to talk to each other.
Yeah, I think you've actually touched on something really important that we focus on quite a bit in our business process outsourcing firm. And that's
Hmm.
everyone, like, there's a lot of material out there, like in sales, about the client experience journey.
Yeah,
What's interesting though is that there's not as much there for like the prospective, I'm going to make this term up, for like the prospective employee journey. But in a way, especially for recruiters, if you think about they've got a client who's, got an account with them or just one role with them. So they're the
yeah.
client, they're on a client experience journey. There's, quite a system around how to fulfill what the client's after. But I think on the other side of that coin, there's the prospective candidates, and they're essentially the job's not going to get filled if you don't find a good candidate that fits the expectations of the end client. And I've seen a little bit of discourse now on the prospective candidate experience journey, and successful recruiters have really good rapport and map out a journey for prospective candidates where even if they're unsuccessful, it doesn't burn a bridge and that candidate
Yeah,
goes,
100%.
like Rahul was really in my corner there, or I felt like that was a really different or
Yeah.
nicely curated process, I guess, on that point. So you've touched on getting back and being timely. Is there anything else that you think is worth considering on that journey?
Well, listen, I mean, there are, like any industry, there are really great recruiters out there, and there are some that are not that great, right? Like
Mm,
it is what it is. I will say the ones that I've worked at that I think are really great. And these are people that when before I started Job Bolt and was looking for a job and I was talking to on a regular basis, they were really, really good, like in the sense of like they scheduled like a get to know me moment. Then they scheduled like follow-up calls to kind of give me updates, or they sent emails to give me updates. I think just, what often happens is you might hear from a recruiter as an applicant, and they get you kind of excited because they're like, wow, looks amazing. Like your experience is, wow, I haven't seen a resume like this in a long time. And then it's just crickets and you don't hear any feedback, right? And I think what would be great, as part of that journey is, check-ins, giving people honest feedback like, hey, I presented your resume to like 10 people and it's just not working. We need to take a look at it. Let's spend
Mm,
some time and go through it. So I think people would really appreciate that. And I think it would just help the overall process be a lot better. And listen, like I've been an applicant, and then the recruiters that I like that help me maybe get a job, I've hired as a recruiter, and
yeah.
when I was hiring people, because I'm like, I know these guys are going to do a thorough job finding me the right candidates, right? So there has to be some sort of process like anything, so that some people are looser about that process, and that's okay, but some people need a checklist, and that's okay. Like I
Yeah.
need to check in with Surge in 2 weeks, nothing wrong with.
Do you have any other last comments, Serge, for the audience?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I invite everybody to give Jobbolt a try,
Mm,
especially employers that are looking to hire someone. We do offer one free post with 30 free interviews. So anybody can try that. If you have a role and you want to just give it a shot, feel free to also reach out. The email address is hello@job-bolt.com, and that's on our website as well. But yeah, give it a shot, give it a try. And if you're an applicant, take a look at some of the roles that we have. There's not a lot of them right now that we have, to be honest, because most of the companies are using us not to post jobs, but are using us as a tool for finishing their interview process. So yeah, I would say take your time, find the right position, but also as an employer, like let's get these people onto jobs. People have been I know people that have not had a job offer in over 2 years or three
wow.
years. And these are really good qualified people, that just have not been able to find work. So I'm not sure how it is down where you are, but in the US, it's been pretty dismal lately. So I'd
Mm.
like to try to help people find work.
Thanks. And thanks for your time today. You had
Yeah,
some
thank
really
you.
valuable insights. Underneath this episode, you'll find links to connecting with Serge and I, and also a link to JobBolt's website. Please like and subscribe this episode and tune in for the next one. Thanks.
Thank you so much.